Alright, the next little mini lesson has a lot, actually not a lot, everything to do with alcohol. Yes, alcohol. Why do you think that is? Well, okay, take a look at this graph here. Alcohol related crimes, yeah, they're pretty much up there with almost, I'm not going to say all crimes, but I don't know what, it probably says in here somewhere that like, oh, here it is. Okay, 37% of all violent crimes were related to the use of alcohol by the offender. Go figure. So when you look at this graph here, you can even just see, and this is actually just all the alcohol related crimes and which ones they are, like simple assault. 70% of simple assault crimes are related to having alcohol in that offender system. So pretty crazy. We're going to talk a little bit about alcohol, how people test for that, but more importantly, this is just to inform you kind of what goes on when there is alcohol in any kind of an arrest. Okay, so what is alcohol? So do know some of these things because you'll see that in your exam. I believe you have an exam. Yes, you do. I took the exam out for next unit. So you'll have that exam, and you'll need to know some of these little details here. So basically, alcohol is an organic compound. Anything that's organic contains carbon, just so you know what that term means. It's not like organic, ooh, it's like grown on this amazing farm with no herbicides and pesticides. No, just kidding. It's not that. When you look at organic, we're talking about something that contains carbon. Okay? When we talk about like organic chemistry and stuff. Okay? So, alcoholic beverages contain ethanol. This is what the ethanol molecule looks like. CH3, CH2, OH. And this OH right here is what we call the hydroxyl group. And that's what gives alcohol its characteristic, what causes the, buzz that people feel when they drink alcohol. Okay? Alright, moving on. Each type of alcohol has a different concentration of alcohol depending on how it's made. Most of the alcohol beverages are made by fermentation of different kinds of fruits and such, and basically depending on how that process goes is how much alcohol is contained within them. So you can see the different percentages, and obviously hard liquor has a particular way of making it. It's called a distillation. So they distill it, which kind of concentrates that ethanol even more. So that's why you have such a high percentage of alcohol within that as compared to, say, beer. Okay, so just a little FYI. Some of you guys may have known that, who knows, but there's that for you. Alright, so how does the body process alcohol? I thought this was interesting. I knew a lot of this already, but when I read through this little mini unit before, presenting it to you guys, I was just kind of amazed to think that 0.08 blood alcohol level, okay, we call that the blood alcohol content, the BAC. You'll see that a lot. That 0.08% is how much of that ethanol is in your blood. So 0.08 of your blood is ethanol. Doesn't seem like a lot, right? That's the legal amount. And then when you reach, like, say, 0.3, which is when typically people are passing out, that's near death, which is kind of a scary thing. So if you've ever known anybody to pass out, or if you have passed out, you don't have to name your name. But that's a scary thing, because when you talk about how the body processes alcohol, alcohol is a depressant, and it depresses everything. So I'm gonna go over that in just a moment. But notice here, this little graph here is showing that basically time down here and your BAC. So in, say, 1 hour, if you have one drink, which is in green, you're already putting your blood alcohol content at a 0.02. Okay, and it just goes up with obviously the number of drinks and the number of hours. So it obviously drops back down. This is your body metabolizing that alcohol. So over a time period of, say, 2 hours, your body will metabolize that one drink. But for someone who's drinking 4 drinks at a time, 7 hours to metabolize that. So if you're going to go and have 4 drinks somewhere, you better not be driving anywhere, because your body it'll take 7 hours to metabolize that in order to drop down below the legal amount. Okay, so anyways, just kind of an interesting little FYI again. So I told you I was going to tell you a little bit more about what alcohol does to the brain and does to the body. So it is a depressant. So when you go over each of these little numbers, it's going to tell you what this part of the brain does normally, but then what alcohol does to affect it. So when you look at the cerebral cortex, okay, this is like the main part of your brain. It's basically processing information of all different areas. And here it talks about the senses, controls thought and mood. So then alcohol is going to basically depress all of those inhibitions, affect your judgment. You're going to make stupid choices, like maybe commit crimes. Okay, so anyways, it's going to also blunt the senses a little bit. You may not, you know, some people that start fighting when they're drunk, it's like they don't feel that pain until they wake up the next morning and, you know, their eye is the size of a baseball, okay? This is the part of the limbic system, controlling the emotions and memory. So basically, you know, you've heard that alcohol is obviously going to affect your memory. You may not remember a lot of things. And your emotions, you may get, you know, angry, aggressive. You may start to cry a ton. So it's going to affect those emotions as well. Here's the cerebellum. The cerebellum is primarily for coordination of movement. So clearly, if you are under the influence, all of those things are going to be depressed. You're not going to be able to be coordinated. You might stumble, you might fall, you might whatever. Look like an idiot, pretty much. Okay, and then the medulla, which is part of the brainstem. This is a really important part, not that, you know, the other parts are not, but the medulla controls the autonomic nervous system, which are all the things that happen without you even asking, like breathing and your heart rate. So all of these things, think about that being depressed. Your heart rate's going to drop, your breathing rate's going to slow down, and to the point where if you have too much alcohol in your system, these things can depress so much that you stop breathing. Okay, kind of a scary thought. So that's a little bit about the brain. Now it affects different parts in your body, just not just the brain. Your lungs, okay, actually blood is going through your lungs constantly, right? So there's alcohol that's being exhaled. That's one of the main ways that they can actually detect that alcohol in your system is just those breathalyzers, which we'll get into a lot, okay? Your liver, okay, your liver is what kind of detoxifies your blood. So obviously if you have above too high of a level, like this is saying right here, 0.3 basically, your alcohol will become toxic and the liver can't even process it fast enough and you can die, okay, of liver failure. Your stomach, 20% of the 20% of the ethanol is absorbed through the stomach. Jeez, what's wrong with me? All right, so anyways, that's what's going to happen is you have too much alcohol. That ethanol is basically going to come back up the system, okay? So that's why you end up throwing up. Your kidneys, again, do another part in detoxifying the blood. So some of that alcohol can be found in the urine, but it's also going to dehydrate you. So you may not even realize it, but by drinking too much, you're going to dehydrate yourself. And then the small intestine, nearly 80% of the ethanol is actually absorbed into the bloodstream through the small intestine. Because your small intestine, when you think about the digestive system, that's where all the nutrients are being absorbed anyway. So that's what's going to happen with alcohol as well. Okay? So not just affecting the brain, many other parts as well. So how can an officer tell if someone is under the influence? Well, there's lots of those sobriety tests, and I'm sure you've heard of them, you've seen them, and you're like, yeah, like that, you know. Well, they do that. They make you walk a straight line, your 1 foot to 1 foot, like that. You can read through these, but they will use all of these tests to determine whether or not maybe you are intoxicated. And if they do not have a breathalyzer on them, which I'm assuming that most of them do, they'll obviously give you a breathalyzer test as well, or wait for somebody to show up with one. Okay? All right. How it's measured. So you guys have heard of a breathalyzer. There's many different ways, and I'm going to just briefly touch on those. I'll let you guys kind of go through the simulations because some of them are a little bit more in depth and take the time to get to know what they're doing with these. But basically, your body can eliminate some of the alcohol through the breath. Okay, that's why if you have drank any alcohol, you can smell it as someone breathes out. Okay, so 3 types of breath alcohol meters. One is based on a chemical reaction. I'm reading down here, by the way, if you guys want to follow along. Another is based on the absorption of infrared by ethanol, which I'll explain. And then the third is based on ethanol's reaction with the fuel cell, kind of like a battery. So let's kind of talk about each one of those just real quick. Okay, so the one that uses a chemical reaction is basically you have ethanol. When you breathe into this breathalyzer, it's going to, if there's any alcohol in your breath, it's going to react with this dichromate ion, okay, and it's going to produce something called chromium, which actually forms a different color. And that breathalyzer is actually going to detect that color change, and that's how it tells how much ethanol is in your breath by the color change, basically. Okay, so it's kind of an easy way to detect that. The next one is using infrared, and I won't go over all these numbers, so make sure that you guys take the time to go through this. You can click on each of these, not click, but roll over each of those numbers and see what's really happening. But basically, you again are breathing in your breath, which has ethanol in the air, and that ethanol is going to be absorbed and basically produces, or a light source is going to produce that infrared, but basically it's going to react with that ethanol and at certain wavelengths and produce a certain amount of energy based on that. Okay, so they can detect that and measure the energy basically that comes out of that. So go through each of these little kind of points here, and that'll make a little bit more sense. And it's called the Intoxilyzer. Haha, sounds so evil, right? All right, and then the last one is the AlcoSensor. Looks similar to the breathalyzer, but basically this is the one that's kind of like a battery, so to speak. So basically it's producing energy as it runs over these kind of electrodes, and basically will produce a certain amount of energy based on how much ethanol is in the breath. So obviously the higher the reading, the more energy that's being created due to that ethanol running over those two kind of electrodes. That means the higher alcohol content in your body. Okay, those are the three types. Now obviously it can be measured from your blood as well. I'm not going to go into this specifically because I want you guys to take the time to do that. So when you click on the next screen, which is almost to the end of this little short unit, you can see how BAC, the blood alcohol content, is measured directly from the blood. So if someone was unconscious, or many different ways that they can take blood and they'll actually see what exactly is in your blood, and they can detect alcohol, they can detect drugs, they can detect all sorts of things from using these different things that you'll see on the next screen. Okay, so alcohol, although isn't necessarily like evidence like we talk about in all of the other units and the little mini lessons we've talked about, but it does play a key role sometimes in a lot of crimes. So obviously forensic scientists need to know a lot about how the body processes it, what happens at certain levels, and so forth. Okay, so there you have it.